Runaway Ralph, Chapter 6, page 130. "You make me happy," sang the campers. "They haven't made Garf happy," thought Ralph, wishing that Garf was sitting on the other side of the bamboo near the craft shop door, where he might find the watch by accident. "That boy is really in trouble," remarked Chum. Ralph turned in surprise. "I thought you were asleep under your cedar shavings," he remarked. "That's what I make them think," said Chum. "I didn't miss a thing." "What's your opinion of the case?" asked Ralph, who knew the right words to use in such a situation from watching so many television programs in the lobby of the Mountain View Inn. "I think that boy's in a tight spot," said Chum. "Everyone knows he used to come into the craft shop when no one was here, and they know he's still the first person to leave the dining hall, so naturally everyone thinks he took the watch. He obviously can't return the watch, because he doesn't know where it is, so of course everyone will think he's keeping it." "That's the way I had it figured," agreed Ralph. "And I can tell you one thing," continued Chum. "He's not going to come near the craft shop until that watch is found." "But what about me?" squeaked Ralph in dismay, thinking of the sign above his cage. "Nobody else feeds me. I'll starve." "I'll try to toss you an alfalfa pellet once in a while," said Chum generously. "My aim isn't very good, but I should be able to get one into your cage now and then, enough to keep you going." "Going where?" wondered Ralph. "No place." What was to become of him when the summer ended and all the campers went home? Would Garf take him away, or would everyone forget him and leave him to starve? He did not want to spend the rest of his life in a cage, and he certainly did not want to be kept alive on a few cast-off alfalfa pellets, only to starve at the end of the summer. There was just one answer. Ralph had to escape. The campers finished a rousing chorus of "You Are My Sunshine," when Ralph's sharp ears caught a sound that had him on his feet in an instant. It was the sound a boy uses to make a toy motorcycle go. It was made softly, as if by a boy alone in his thoughts. Garf had found Ralph's motorcycle. "Hey!" squeaked Ralph at the top of his small voice. "That's my motorcycle!" Garf stopped pushing the motorcycle across the bamboo leaves, just long enough to make Ralph think he might have heard. Then, in Ralph's disappointment, he put the motorcycle in the pocket of his jeans and went off toward his lodge for the rest period required of all the campers. Ralph was so excited he left the bars of his cage and went for a run on his wheel. Garf spoke his language. He knew how to make the motorcycle go. There was hope after all. All Ralph had to do was explain to Garf. As Ralph thought the matter over, his exercise wheel moved more and more slowly until it came to a stop and Ralph sat on his haunches. His plan would not work. Until Garf was cleared of the theft of the watch, he was not going to risk coming in the craft shop. Ralph had to agree that Chum was right. Chapter 7. The Escape. Ralph was desperate to escape. His food supply was running low, and as Chum had predicted, Garf stayed away from the craft shop. Ralph ran around the sides of his cage, hoping there might be an opening, one overlooked space size wide enough for a mouse to squeeze through. There was none, as he'd known all along. He pushed on the door with all his strength, but he could not budge it. He ran on his wheel in hopes that it might just once take him someplace. But of course it didn't. Ralph needed help. "Hey, Chum," he called over to the hamster, who was noisily wearing down his teeth on the bars of his cage. "You're a stretchy fellow. See if you can stretch over here and pull this door open." For once Chum obliged by putting his shoulders to the bars of his cage, stretching his foreleg as far as he could, and reaching with his paw. He barely managed to flick a wire of the side of Ralph's cage with a toenail. "There must be some way we can get out of here," said Ralph. There's got to be." "Not for me," answered Chum. "I wouldn't leave if I could. I've lived in a cage all my life, and I'm too old to start scrounging. Besides, I rather enjoy trying to bite the hands that feed me." "I would rather scrounge than starve," said Ralph. He still had a supply of food, but he pawed through some old sunflower seed husks to make sure he had not missed any edible bits. Over in the dining hall, the campers, unaware that a mouse was soon to starve, sang with gusto, "The ants came marching two by two, hurrah, hurrah." The ants came marching 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah. The ants came marching 2 by 2, the little one stopped to tie his shoe. As his food supply dwindled further, Ralph felt nervous and guilty. His mother had taught him to store food. The sight of the campers' mosaics of dried peas and beans was hard to bear. He felt he would no longer object to a little dried glue on his food. When Chum managed to toss an alfalfa pellet into his cage, he was humbly grateful. Outside his cage, the campers went about their activities, unaware of the desperate mouse in the craft shop. Lana cradled Catso in her arms whenever she could catch him, and the smug look on the cat's face was unbearable to Ralph. Karen returned to paint her bleach bottle piggy bank. Everyone who passed her work table asked if her watch had been returned, and Karen, busy with her piggy bank, shook her head. Occasionally, Ralph's ears caught the familiar and he looked out to see Garf pushing his motorcycle across a bench or around the edge of the ping-pong table, as if he were lost in a dream of speed and danger. The sight of his precious motorcycle made Ralph even more frantic for freedom. And then, to add to his troubles, there was still Catso, who had been only temporarily amused by the wristwatch, and who would sooner or later, Ralph was sure, return to the cage. Ralph felt thin, nervous, and run down. His cage was untidy, even by mouse standards of housekeeping. "I wish I knew how to stage a jailbreak," he confided to Chum. "If there's anything I can do to help, let me know," said Chum, and cracked a sunflower seed he'd earned that morning when he stuffed his cheeks until he'd fallen to the bottom of his cage. Chum might toss me a sunflower seed instead of those alfalfa pellets, thought Ralph crossly. At rest period, Aunt Jill came into the craft shop to straighten supply shelves. Ralph watched as she sorted dried seeds, which looked delicious, as well as weeds and pine cones. As he watched, he saw a possibility of help. After all, Aunt Jill, unlike most women, was kind to mice. Looking as small and as pitiful as possible, Ralph clung to the bars of his cage. In time, Aunt Jill noticed him. "Hello there, little fellow," he said kindly. Ralph made his whiskers shiver. "Let me out of here," he said, quite sure the woman could not understand. Aunt Jill smiled when she heard the mouse squeak, and offered him a sunflower seed, which he snatched and cracked so greedily he forgot to look pitiful. "My, but you're hungry. You're a hungry little fellow," remarked Aunt Jill, but she didn't offer another seed. Instead, when the camp awoke, she called to Garf, who came to the door of the craft shop but did not enter. "Your mouse is hungry," said Aunt Jill. "Somebody else can feed him," said Garf. "He's your personal mouse," reminded Aunt Jill. "I didn't take the old watch," said Garf. "I don't want to come in there." "I'm sure you didn't take it," said Aunt Jill calmly. "But don't forget that you wanted to be the only one to feed your mouse. He's hungry, and his cage needs to be cleaned." Garf hesitated, but entered the craft shop, and while Ralph scrambled around looking for a way out, he slid the bottom from the cage, changed the cedar shavings, and replaced it. He detached the water bottle, filled it at the sink, and was fastening it to the cage when Aunt Jill went out, leaving the boy alone with the two animals. Here at last was the moment Ralph had been waiting for. "Say, Garf," he began. But the boy, not expecting the mouse to speak, appeared not to hear. Ralph was desperate. "Say, Garf," he said at the top of his mouse voice. When Garf glanced at him, Ralph said as loud as he could, "Listen to me. You know that motorcycle you've been playing with? It's mine." Garf stared at his mouse. "You're talking," he said in an astonished whisper. "I don't believe it. You're talking." Ralph had spoken, and Garf answered. They were both so excited they were speechless. Finally, Garf spoke again. "Go on, say something more." Ralph pulled himself together and remembered why speaking to Garf was urgent. "P-b-b-b-b-b-b-b," he sputtered to show Garf what he meant. "That motorcycle, it's mine. P-b-b-b-b-b-b. That's the noise I make to run it." "You're joking." Garf continued to stare at Ralph as if he could not believe what was happening. "No, I'm not," said Ralph. "I hid it under the bamboo leaves just before that cat pounced on me. I hid my crash helmet, too." "Your crash helmet?" Garf could not help laughing, which, of course, hurt Ralph's feelings. The boy pulled the motorcycle out of his pocket, studied it, and then studied Ralph. "It's the right size," he admitted. "If it's yours, where did you get it?" "Back at the Mountain View Inn." "The Mountain View Inn?" Garf was surprised. "What were you doing there?" "It's my home," said Ralph with dignity. "A boy who was a guest there gave me the motorcycle." "No kidding." Garf almost believed Ralph. "Let me out of here," pleaded Ralph. "I'll show you I can ride it." Garf looked as if he were tempted, but said almost regretfully, "No, you might run away, and I want to keep you." "Aw, come on, Garf," coaxed Ralph. "Nope," said Garf, "and I've got to get out of here. Aunt Jill just left to give me a chance to return that watch, and I don't have it. I don't have it, and I don't know where it is." Ralph saw an opportunity for bargaining. "I do," he said. "I know where the watch is." "Where?" asked Garf. "Let me out and I'll tell you," said Ralph. "No," said Garf. "I'm going to take you home with me." "Your mother won't like it," said Ralph. "She'll make you get rid of me." He knew by the look on Garf's face he'd struck a sensitive spot, so he continued, "She'll say I'm messy, and she will say I smell." Garf looked uncomfortable. "Let me out of here, and I'll show you where the watch is," persisted Ralph. Garf looked as if he might be tempted. He thought for a while and said, "My mother might let me keep a mouse. It wouldn't hurt to ask, and I don't want to know where the watch is. If anyone saw me trying to return it, they would say I stole it, and I didn't."